Most people misunderstand the corporate budget. They view it as a mere financial forecast for the coming year. In reality, it is a rigid system of behavioral constraint and strategic control. A budget is the formal quantification of management's plans. It functions simultaneously as a planning mechanism to allocate resources, a communication system to align departments, and a behavioral constraint to cap spending. But building this system exposes the central tension of corporate planning, the massive disconnect in scale between the boardroom and the factory floor. An executive board might set an abstract, decade-long strategic mission, like capturing 35% of U.S. market share. The challenge is figuring out how that high-level goal mathematically translates into a specific order for raw steel next Tuesday. This translation requires an interdependent architecture called the master budget. It is the mechanism where abstract strategy is mathematically forced into operational reality. Before calculations are made, an organization must align its planning horizons to prevent departmental chaos. Corporate planning operates across three distinct timeframes: strategic, intermediate, and operational. This chart outlines organizational planning. The strategic plan concerns senior managers, extending 10 years to map long-term objectives. Next, the intermediate plan concerns middle managers, spanning 2 years for regional goals. Finally, the operational plan dictates lower-level managers' actions over a single year. The operational timeframe is where the master budget lives. It is the densest, most critical node of the organization, where long-term priorities are converted into immediate, accountable metrics. The master budget is actually a compilation of many interlocking budgets, and it must be built in a strict, unalterable chronological sequence. This diagram shows the entire master budget process. The absolute starting point of this architecture is the sales budget at the very top. Sales must come first, because volume dictates absolutely everything else. An organization cannot know what to produce, what materials to buy, or how many workers to hire without first projecting its sales in units. Immediately following the sales projection is the step down into the production budget. The math required here is precise. Production is not just equal to sales, it is unit sales plus or minus the desired changes in finished goods inventory. The company must account for what it wants to keep in stock. This creates a fragile cascade. A single miscalculation at the sales catalyst flows downward, corrupting every subsequent operational assumption in the entire company. Looking back at the chart, once the production target is set, it immediately splits into a triad of distinct resource requirements: direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. To calculate the exact dollar amounts for these three nodes, management uses standard costs. These are predetermined objective estimates of what a specific unit of input should cost the company. Organizations typically choose between two types of standards. Ideal standards represent theoretical perfection, assuming the most skilled workers with zero waste or machine downtime. Setting these often damages employee morale, as they are virtually impossible to attain. By contrast, practical standards represent performance that is expected to be achieved by reasonably well-trained workers. Because they account for normal spoilage and routine downtime, they serve as a highly effective motivational tool. The most complex part of the cost triad is manufacturing overhead. Traditional budgeting lazily lumps all indirect costs into a single opaque pool and allocates them based on a generic driver like volume. To fix this blind spot, companies use activity-based budgeting, or ABB. ABB is a method that applies activity-based costing principles to the budgeting process to more accurately assign indirect costs. ABB forces management to break that monolithic overhead block into specific cost drivers. It identifies the exact cause and effect relationship for each expense, separating out pools for machine hours, engineering setups, and inspections. Practical standards and activity-based budgeting transform cost estimation into a definitive statement on the operational efficiency management accepts as the organizational norm. Returning to the flowchart, the triad of costs eventually merges down into the cost of goods sold, culminating in the pro forma income statement. Notice the thick horizontal line dividing the chart. This represents a critical boundary. Everything above it constitutes the operating budget, the detailed plan for acquiring resources. Crossing below that line enters the financial budget, the plan for actually obtaining the funds.
Down here, the capital budget for equipment purchases, alongside projected cash disbursements and collections, all feed directly into the cash budget. The cash budget is universally a most critical document in the entire architecture. It details projected receipts and disbursements, which is particularly vital for organizations operating in seasonal industries. Ignoring liquidity is dangerous. An organization can possess massive, valuable assets, but without immediately available cash, operations seize up. This is the harsh reality of the boundary. A firm that looks highly profitable on the pro forma income statement can still be driven into sudden bankruptcy if the cash budget reveals a temporary shortage of liquidity. The master budget architecture may be mathematically perfect, but its actual success depends entirely on the integrity of the data fed into it. That data integrity is dictated by organizational behavior, specifically who holds the authority to set the budget targets. This table compares two primary approaches. While a top-down approach ensures consistency, it destroys line manager commitment because the budget is imposed by upper management. Conversely, bottom-up budgeting generates high ownership by incorporating lower management input, but introduces a dangerous flaw: the creation of budgetary slack. Budgetary slack is the intentional underestimation of revenues and overestimation of expenses. Lower managers negotiate for less stringent measures to easily hit their targets and avoid unfavorable variances. Without strict behavioral checks, participatory budgeting inherently builds a hidden, expensive cushion of inefficiency directly into the master budget. To combat this institutional bloat and eliminate slack, organizations employ zero-based budgeting, or ZBB. ZBB stands in stark contrast to traditional incremental budgeting, where managers simply take last year's budget and add a small percentage increase without much scrutiny. ZBB forces every manager to justify their department's entire budget from a bedrock of zero every single cycle. All expenditures must be proven necessary from a cost-benefit perspective, regardless of historical spending. This level of scrutiny requires viewing the master budget as a living, dynamic system rather than a static annual chore. Management executes this through the control loop, which consists of 5 steps: establish the standard of performance, measure actual performance, analyze the variance, implement corrective action, and revise the standards. The variances, the exact differences between the budgeted standard and actual performance, are the critical signals. They tell management exactly where the system is failing and where resources are being used inefficiently. If a company builds a master budget but fails to use it to continuously measure actual performance against established goals, it isn't a strategic control. It is merely an expensive wish list.